That morning, hunger was not just an ache in my belly. It was a beast tearing through my ribs, clawing at my spine, whispering that maybe this would be the day it finally killed us. My siblings no longer cried. They had grown too weak even for tears. Their small bodies curled like broken sticks in the corner of our hut, their breaths shallow, their lips pale. I walked into the scorching sun with the last meal in my hand, believing it was meant for them. But fate had other plans. On that road, hunger would not just test me, it would break me. The path out of the hut felt longer than ever. The ground was cracked, split open by months without rain. Dust lifted with each step of my bare feet, stinging my eyes and drying my mouth further. The air was heavy, pressing down on me as if even the sky was tired of watching us starve. Our hut leaned behind me, like a tired old man ready to collapse. Its mud walls were splitting, its thatched roof shedding straw-like hair falling from the head of the sick. But inside lay what mattered most: 3 pairs of eyes that looked to me for salvation. My sister, barely 6, had whispered last night, "Sister, will we eat tomorrow?" Her voice had been so faint, like the flicker of a candle about to die. My younger brothers hadn't spoken at all. They only pressed their ribs against me, their bodies cold despite the heat. And I had lied. Again. "Yes," I had said, stroking their hair, hiding my tears in the darkness. "Tomorrow will be better." But I knew tomorrow had no promises. Tomorrow had only hunger. That morning I carried in my hand a single piece of bread, hard, dry, and too small to fill even one of their bellies, but it was all I had. I had traded the last bundle of firewood for it at the market. The trader had laughed at me, called me desperate, but I ignored him. Desperate was not an insult anymore. It was who I had become. The bread was not just food. It was hope, and hope was something I could not afford to lose. So I walked, clutching it tight, my mind already breaking it into pieces, small enough to give each child a taste, even if no one was satisfied. At least they would believe in tomorrow again. But then, I saw her. She sat slumped by the roadside, her back against the twisted roots of a tree that had long stopped bearing fruit. Her clothes were rags, layered in dust, her hair tangled with dry grass. She looked like hunger itself had sculpted her, carving away flesh until nothing remained but bone and skin. People passed her without a glance. Some muttered, "Another beggar." Others sneered, "She won't last the week." No one stopped. I should not have stopped either. But something about her froze me in my tracks. Her hands trembled in her lap, her chest rose and fell in shallow gasps. But it was her eyes that held me captive. They lifted slowly, as if weighed down by centuries, and met mine. They were not the eyes of a beggar. They were eyes that carried pain, but behind that pain was a light, faint but unbroken. A strange dignity clung to her, like a queen stripped of her crown, but not her pride. My heart began to pound. The bread in my hand suddenly grew heavier, pressing into my palm until it hurt. I thought of my siblings waiting in the hut, their hollow eyes, their tiny hands reaching out. That bread was theirs. Their survival depended on it. But my legs would not move. I stood frozen, the marketplace noise fading, the traders' shouts becoming distant echoes. It was just me, the bread, and this stranger whose presence demanded a choice I could not make. Logic screamed, "Keep walking." Compassion whispered, "Stop." And then, her lips parted. Her voice was not loud. It was barely a breath, softer than the rustle of leaves in the dry wind. Yet it struck me harder than any shout could. "Child, do you have food?" The world stilled. The sun burned above. The dust swirled around us. But none of it mattered. My hand shook, the bread trembling in my grip. I thought of my sister's whisper, "Will we eat tomorrow?" I thought of my brother's empty eyes, their silent cries. I thought of every sacrifice I had made, every lie I had told, every hope I had clung to. And still, her voice echoed. "Child, do you have food?" Her eyes did not plead. They demanded nothing. They simply waited, calm, certain, as though she already knew the weight of the battle raging inside me. My throat closed, my chest burned, my knees weakened. In that moment, hunger broke me. Not because I had nothing left, but because I had to choose who deserved the nothing I had. I stood trembling, torn between the faces of my starving siblings and the piercing gaze of this frail stranger who seemed more than she appeared. The bread in my hand burned like fire, my heart racing with guilt and fear. I wanted to speak, but no words came. And then her voice returned, weaker now, almost fading into the dust. "Child, do you have food?" The bread in my basket felt like a curse, small, stale, crumbling at the edges, yet it carried the power to decide who lived and who starved. Each step I took, its weight grew heavier, as though it knew the choice I feared to make. My siblings' hollow eyes haunted me, begging silently from the shadows of my memory. And yet, in front of me, a stranger's trembling voice asked for life. Her question clung to me like the dust swirling in the hot wind. "Child, do you have food?" I wanted to close my ears, to run, to pretend she was just another beggar at the roadside. But her eyes, they held me, tired, sunken, weak, but not empty. There was something inside them that felt impossible to ignore. The bread was supposed to save my family. Just one meal, if you could even call it that, shared between 3 starving children. A tiny promise that tomorrow might still come. Without it, they would look at me with hollow faces, waiting for an answer I did not have. But this woman, her hands, shook where they rested on her lap. Her lips were cracked, bleeding slightly at the corners. She seemed as if a single breath of wind might carry her away. "And still?" she asked. Not with greed, not with demand, but with a voice that carried both weakness and dignity. The crowd had begun to notice my hesitation. A man leaning against a market stall smirked. "Look at the fool. She'll waste her food on a dying beggar." Another voice rang out. "Her siblings will starve tonight. And for what? A stranger who won't last till morning." Laughter rippled through the crowd, cruel and sharp as knives. Children pointed at me, mocking. Women whispered behind their palms. I felt the weight of their stares, each one a stone thrown at my heart. But none of them mattered as much as the battle raging inside me. I thought of my sister, her frail hand clutching mine in the night as she whispered, "Sister, will we eat tomorrow?" I thought of my little brother's cough that rattled his thin chest, his ribs sharp against my arms when I carried him. I thought of the smallest one, too weak to play, too tired even to cry. How could I steal from them to give to someone else? And yet, how could I walk away? I crouched, my knees trembling. The bread in my hand felt as heavy as stone, as though the whole world balanced on its crust. The woman's eyes followed it, not hungrily, not desperately, but with a strange calm, as though she already knew what I would do. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it would break through my chest. My hands shook as I lifted the bread, staring at it one last time. It wasn't much, but it was everything. And then, my fingers betrayed me. I broke it. The sound was small, just a crack in the silence. Yet inside me it was thunder. A piece of me crumbled with that bread. Tears stung my eyes as crumbs fell to the dirt. The crowd gasped, then roared with laughter. "She gave it away! Her family will curse her tonight. She's weaker than I thought." Their words were like fire on my skin, but I no longer cared, because when I placed that piece of bread into her hands, the world seemed to stop. Her fingers trembled as they closed around it. For a moment, she only stared at it, as though she could not believe it was real. Then slowly, reverently, she lifted it to her lips and took a small bite. Her eyes closed. A single tear traced down her cheek. I felt my throat tighten, my heart breaking in ways I could not explain. This was not just feeding the hungry. This was giving away the last thread of hope I had. And yet, something inside me whispered it was right. The crowd faded. The noise, the laughter, the whispers, all dissolved. All I saw was her face, softened by relief, glowing with something almost holy. Then, suddenly, she moved. Her frail hand shot out, gripping my wrist with a strength that shocked me. I gasped, my eyes widening. Her eyes opened and fixed on mine, burning now with a fire that had not been there before. Her voice was low, trembling, but steady enough to pierce me to the bone. "You don't know who I am," she whispered. The words struck me like a storm. My breath caught, my body frozen, the bread still crumbling in her hand. I thought I had shared a meal with a dying beggar. But her grip, her eyes, her voice, they told me she was something more. The crowd laughed behind me, blind to the truth. And in that moment, I realized I had just stepped into a secret that would change everything. Her whisper cut deeper than hunger itself. "You don't know who I am." The words rattled in my bones long after she spoke them. I had given her bread, expecting desperation, but she ate with grace, like someone accepting an offering, not a favor. The dust rose around us. The villagers mocked her as a beggar, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had placed bread into the hands of someone far greater than she appeared. For a long moment, I simply stood there, staring at her. The crowd's laughter echoed around me, sharp and cruel, but it no longer felt real. My world had narrowed to the frail woman holding the broken half of bread in her thin hands. She ate slowly, each bite measured, deliberate. There was no frenzy, no fear that the food might vanish. Her back straightened with every swallow, her posture calm and steady, as though dignity itself refused to abandon her, even here in the dust. When she finished, she lifted her hand, trembling yet firm, and touched her forehead briefly as if in a ritual. Then her eyes locked on mine. "Bless you, child," she whispered. "May your path be guarded. May the dust beneath your feet rise to protect you. May your hands never go empty." Her words were soft, but they carried weight, like an ancient prayer. They wrapped around me, both comforting and unsettling. I swallowed hard, unsure whether to bow my head or run. No beggar had ever blessed me before. Their hands usually reached for more. Their voices begged for coins or scraps. But this woman gave instead of taking, gave me words that felt like prophecy. Behind us, the villagers whispered too. "She blesses her? Who does she think she is? She eats like a queen at a feast. Look at her pride. She acts like royalty." Their gossip carried on the hot wind, wrapping around me like thorns. I wanted to ignore them, but the words struck a chord. Royalty. The way she ate. The way she spoke. It didn't fit the image of a beggar at all. I tried to reason with myself. Hunger makes people strange, I thought. Maybe she clings to dignity because that's all she has left. Maybe she blesses strangers to comfort herself. But the seed of doubt had been planted. What if she wasn't who she seemed? When I turned to leave, my heart pounding with confusion, her voice followed me again. "You carry more than bread, child. You carry destiny." The sound of it froze me mid-step. My breath caught in my throat. Destiny? The word coiled around my chest like a snake, squeezing. I wanted to turn, to demand what she meant, but fear rooted me in place. I stumbled home, clutching the empty basket to my chest, my mind in chaos. That night, our hut flickered with the weak glow of fire. My siblings devoured the half loaf I brought home, too grateful to notice it had once been whole. Their small hands tore at it, their lips trembled as they chewed. Laughter, thin but real, rose for the first time in days, but I could not eat. I sat apart, staring at the flames. Every crackle seemed to echo her words. You don't know who I am. You carry destiny. Why had she spoken like that? What did she mean? The villagers' gossip replayed in my head. That woman acts like royalty. My stomach twisted. No, it was madness. Queens do not wear rags. Royals do not sit by the roadside waiting for scraps. But then why couldn't I forget the fire in her eyes? As my siblings drifted to sleep, curled together like small birds in a nest, I kept my gaze on the fire. Shadows danced on the cracked walls. The wood popped, sparks leaping into the dark. And then I saw her. For a single heartbeat, her face shimmered in the flames. Not hollow, not broken, but radiant. Her eyes glowed, steady and unyielding, filled with a hidden strength that made my skin prickle. I gasped, clutching my chest. My heart pounded like drums of war. It couldn't be real. It had to be my mind, twisted by hunger and fear. But even when I blinked, even when I rubbed my eyes, her voice seemed to linger in the smoke curling through the hut. You don't know who I am. I pressed my siblings closer, trying to quiet the storm in my chest. But her eyes stayed with me, watching, daring me to uncover the truth. That night, I didn't sleep. The villagers' whispers circled my mind. The fire's glow haunted me, and her voice burned like an ember in my soul. Who was she? A beggar? A mad woman? Or something far more dangerous and far more powerful? When the last flame flickered and died, I could still see her eyes glowing in the darkness. I never thought my siblings would beg me to open our door to a stranger, but that night, their small voices broke me. Sister, let her stay. Please. Hunger had stolen their strength, yet hope lit their eyes at the thought of her. My chest tightened with fear, but against my better judgment, I let the woman step inside our broken hut. I believed I was giving her shelter, but in truth I was inviting a storm. Our hut had never welcomed guests before. What would we offer them? Our cracked walls, our leaking roof, our silence filled with hunger. To me, our home was a cage of survival. To my siblings, it was all they knew. But that night, they looked at me with eyes so wide, so full of longing, that I could not say no. When she stepped across the threshold, the air seemed to shift. Her feet touched the dirt floor, like a queen treading on marble. My siblings rushed to her, their small hands tugging at her rags as though she were a long-lost grandmother. She bent down, touching each of their heads with trembling fingers, and whispered blessings over them. May your laughter outlive sorrow. May you be as brave as the lion. May the stars guide your sleep. The children giggled, their eyes sparkling as though the blessings had wrapped them in invisible cloaks of light. I watched in silence, my suspicion thickening like smoke. When she sat cross-legged by the fire, the stories began. Her voice was weak, yet it carried a strange music, weaving images so vivid that even I was caught in them. She spoke of deserts where palaces rose like mountains of gold, of courts where kings in jeweled crowns held councils beneath painted ceilings. She described banquets where tables bent beneath roasted meats, steaming rice, and fruits that dripped with honey. Her words carried refinement no beggar should possess. She named fabrics, silk, velvet, brocade, as though her hands had touched them. She spoke of spices, cardamom, saffron, cinnamon, as though her tongue remembered their taste. My siblings sat spellbound, their hollow cheeks glowing in the firelight, their small mouths parted in awe. For the first time in months, they forgot their hunger. But I didn't forget. I studied her. Every gesture, every pause, every tilt of her head. She spoke with a grace that unsettled me. It was not the clumsy chatter of villagers, not the desperate pleading of beggars. It was the measured cadence of someone born to command. Who was she? Hours passed, though it felt like moments. My siblings fought to keep their eyes open, begging for more. She only smiled, stroking their hair, and promised, Another time, my little ones. One by one, they drifted into sleep, their lips still curved with the echoes of her stories. For a long time, I sat awake, watching her. The fire's glow softened her features, casting shadows that seemed to reshape her face into someone regal, someone unrecognizable. I thought of the villagers' gossip. She acts like royalty. I thought of her whisper, "You don't know who I am." The doubts gnawed at me, louder than the hunger in my belly. The fire sank low, its flames shrinking into embers. My siblings curled close together, their small bodies warm against each other. The hut grew quiet, save for the sound of the wind pressing through the cracks in the walls. And then, I heard it. A voice. Her voice. She was whispering, not in our tongue, not in the trade language of the market. No, this was different, older, richer. Each word rolled like thunder, smoothed into silk. The rhythm was strange, rising and falling like a chant, carrying power that made my skin prickle. I froze. Her body remained still, but her lips moved with steady purpose, her words weaving through the air like smoke. My siblings stirred but did not wake. The sound filled the hut, invisible yet suffocating. I could not understand her words, but I felt them, like they carried a weight too heavy for the air to hold. And then, suddenly, she stopped. Her head lifted. Slowly, her eyes opened. The firelight caught them, and for an instant I swore I saw them glow. My breath caught, my heart hammering so loud I feared she would hear. I shut my eyes quickly, pretending to sleep, my body trembling. The silence pressed heavy again, but I knew the truth. She was no ordinary woman. Her strange whispers lingered long after they ended, circling my mind like ghosts. Who was she? This woman who carried blessings on her lips, stories in her voice, and secrets in her silence. I dared not ask, dared not move. But as the last ember of the fire died, I knew with chilling certainty. I had welcomed more than a guest into my hut. I had welcomed a mystery that could destroy us all. The moonlight poured through the cracks of our roof, and that was when I saw her, kneeling in the dirt, her arms raised, her lips moving in a language I had never heard. The fire had died, yet her voice carried a heat that made my chest tighten. She did not look like a beggar now. She looked like someone dangerous, someone powerful. And in that moment, I realized the woman I had fed might destroy us all. I froze where I sat, my body trembling against the mud wall of our hut. My siblings slept soundly, their small breaths rising and falling in peaceful rhythm, but I could not close my eyes. Every word that fell from her lips felt sharp, heavy, like it did not belong in our broken home. The glow of the moon wrapped her face, and for a terrifying instant, she looked like she was carved from silver, ageless, regal, untouchable. I swallowed hard, my voice breaking before I could stop it. "Who are you?" Her chant cut short. Slowly she turned, her eyes catching the pale light. I wanted her to look weak, to look lost, to look human. But her stare was something else, steady, piercing, as though she carried centuries in her gaze. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in a voice low but sharp enough to cut the air, she whispered, "Child, silence is your shield. Some truths, if spoken too soon, could destroy you." My heart raced. The weight of her words pressed on my chest until I could hardly breathe. The next morning, the world pretended to be the same. Chickens squawked in the dust, children ran barefoot through the market, women argued over grain. But for me, nothing was the same. Inside our hut, she had begun to change everything. She gathered my siblings, her frail hands guiding them as she taught them songs that had never been sung in our village. Strange, haunting melodies that rose and fell like the beating of distant drums. My brothers clapped their hands to the rhythm. My sister's voice lifted with laughter as she repeated verses she barely understood. Their joy should have comforted me, but it unsettled me instead. And it wasn't just the songs. She corrected the way they sat, urging them to keep their backs straight, their heads high. She taught them to bow before speaking, to weigh their words carefully before letting them fall. She made them walk slowly, balanced, as though they were learning to carry something invisible on their shoulders. These were not lessons of survival. These were lessons of royalty. My suspicion deepened with every gesture, every word. That evening, when the fire burned low, I dared to ask again. "You are no beggar," I whispered, my voice trembling. "How do you know these things? Where did you learn them?" She looked at me for a long time, her silence heavier than any answer. Then she leaned closer, her voice soft, almost mournful. "I have lived many lives, child. In some I had nothing. In others I had everything. But what I carry now are not riches, only memories. And memories are sometimes more dangerous than gold." Her words sent a shiver through me. "Tell me who you are," I demanded, though my voice shook. Her eyes glistened with something I could not name. Grief, longing, maybe even fear. "Not yet," she whispered. "To know too soon would place your family in danger. Let silence protect you until the right moment comes." I should have turned her away. I should have told her to leave. But every time I looked at my siblings, their faces lit with joy I hadn't seen in years, my courage crumbled. And yet, whispers followed us. In the market, women eyed her suspiciously, their voices sharp. "She does not walk like a beggar. She speaks too well. Mark my words. This one hides something." Men shook their heads as I passed, muttering that I was a fool for letting her stay under my roof. Their eyes burned holes into my back, but none of them dared say more. I told myself their words meant nothing, but in my heart, they only sharpened my own doubts. And then it happened. The marketplace was as noisy as always, traders shouting prices, goats bleating, dust rising with every footstep. I held the jar on my head, balancing carefully, my siblings trailing close behind me. But then, silence fell. A silence so sharp it cut through the noise like a blade. I turned. They came like shadows given flesh, armed strangers, tall and broad-shouldered, their boots striking the earth with heavy thuds. Their clothes were foreign, their swords gleamed in the sun, their eyes scanned the crowd with a predator's focus. The villagers parted quickly, their whispers spreading like wildfire. "Soldiers. From where? What do they want?" The leader stepped forward, his voice booming across the square. "We seek a woman," he declared, his words slicing through the air. "A queen in hiding. She has fled her enemies. She wears rags, but her bearing betrays her. Have you seen her?" The world tilted beneath my feet. A queen. My heart thudded against my ribs. My vision blurred as her face filled my mind. Her glowing eyes, her graceful movements, her whispered chants. A queen. In hiding. The jar nearly slipped from my head. My siblings clutched at my arms, their eyes wide with fear. Around me, villagers exchanged glances, their whispers louder, sharper, dangerous. I stood frozen, my body trembling, my secret burning like fire in my chest. The soldiers' eyes swept across the market, sharp and unrelenting. My siblings held on to me, their small fingers digging into my arms. I bit back the cry rising in my throat, but inside, I already knew the truth. The woman in my hut was no beggar. She was the queen they hunted, and if her secret was discovered, my family would be the first to fall with her. It began with whispers, but by the time the sun rose, those whispers had sharpened into knives. Everywhere I walked, eyes followed me, cold, accusing, merciless. The same villagers who once pitied me now spat at the ground when I passed. Traders pulled their baskets away, children mocked my siblings, and for the first time in my life, I felt hunted. The market was no longer a place of survival. It had become a battlefield. At first I thought it was only my imagination, the way the women by the well paused their gossip when I approached, the way men at the spice stalls lowered their voices when I passed. But it wasn't in my head. By midday, their whispers grew bolder, slicing through the air like spears. She hides something. She walks with that beggar too often. Mark my words, this girl knows where the queen is. My chest tightened with every word. My siblings walked close to me, clutching at my arms as if they sensed the storm brewing. The cruelty came first through rejection. At the grain stall, I held out my last coin, praying it would be enough for a handful of rice. The merchant stared at it, then shoved my hand back. Not today, he muttered. Go. At the fruit basket, a woman yanked her goods away before I could touch them. I won't sell to liars, she hissed. Even the butcher, who once gave me scraps for free, shook his head. Take your hunger elsewhere, he snapped. I want no trouble. Each refusal struck deeper than hunger. I returned home empty-handed, my siblings' hollow eyes following me in silence. The disappointment on their faces cut sharper than the villagers' cruelty. And yet, the woman in my hut remained calm. When children pointed and mocked, she smiled with quiet dignity. When women spat insults, she walked past them as if their words were dust. Her posture was straight, her head held high, her silence more powerful than any reply. To me, her presence was a shield, but to the villagers, it was proof. Look how she carries herself, they whispered. Not like a beggar, not like us. She hides her crown under rags. And that girl, she's protecting her. Their voices grew louder, their eyes sharper. The breaking point came one afternoon in the market square. I was returning from the well, the clay jar, heavy on my head, when the crowd gathered. Dozens of faces turned toward me, their expressions hard, unforgiving. You must tell us what you know, one woman shouted. Where is she hiding? A man demanded, his fists clenched. She has brought danger on us all, another cried. The circle tightened around me, their words striking like stones. My siblings clung to my legs, their small bodies trembling. My heart hammered against my ribs as I stammered, I don't know what you mean. Please, I know nothing. But my denial only fanned their anger. She lies. Look at her, always with that woman. She'll bring soldiers to our doors. The crowd pressed closer. I thought they might tear me apart with their hands. And then, she stepped forward. The woman who had entered my hut as a frail stranger now stood before them, like an unshaken tree in a storm. Her clothes were still rags, but her eyes carried a fire that silenced even the boldest tongues. This child owes you no answers, she said, her voice calm, steady. If you are hungry, blame your greed. If you are afraid, blame your cowardice. But do not lay your burdens on her. The villagers faltered. Their anger quivered beneath her gaze, their shouts withered into mutters. One by one they stepped back, their suspicion still alive, but silenced for now. I stood behind her, my breath shallow, my body trembling. She had shielded me, but at what cost? Each word she spoke only made her seem less like a beggar and more like the very person they hunted. That night, I wept by the fire. Why are they doing this? I whispered. Why are they turning against me? She sat across from me, her face calm in the glow of the flames. Because you showed kindness where they showed none, she said softly. Your courage shames them, and envy often hides itself in cruelty. Her words soothed me, but my fear did not fade, because beyond the cruelty of the villagers lay something far more dangerous, the soldiers. The next morning, the market felt like a graveyard. People avoided me now, their eyes darting away, their voices hushed. My siblings walked close, their hands gripping mine. I thought perhaps the storm had passed. But then, I heard them. Boots, heavy, merciless, striking against the ground like drums of war. The crowd parted quickly as the soldiers marched into the square, their swords gleaming in the sun. The leader's eyes swept across the market, cold and sharp as a blade. My stomach knotted. My siblings clung to me, their small hands trembling. The soldier's gaze landed on me. He strode forward, his shadow falling across my face, his voice low but deadly. "You," he said, his eyes piercing into mine. "Have you seen the runaway queen?" The market froze, every whisper dying into silence. My heart slammed against my ribs, the truth burning in my chest like fire. If I spoke, I would betray her. If I stayed silent, I would condemn us all. The soldier's question cut through me like a knife, and in that moment, I knew. My answer would change everything. The soldier's question still hung in the air like thunder that refused to fade. "Have you seen the runaway queen?" My throat tightened, my chest burned, and I thought I would collapse under the weight of every eye fixed on me. Then I felt her hand on my shoulder, steady, unshaken. I turned in time to see her pull something shining from beneath her rags. Gold flashed in the sun, heavy and royal. The crowd gasped, and my world shattered. She was no beggar. She was a queen. Her hand trembled, but not from weakness. No, this was the tremble of someone carrying the weight of an entire kingdom. The necklace glittered, its pendant a lion's head with eyes of blood-red stone. It did not belong to the dust, nor to rags, nor to exile. It belonged to thrones, to crowns, to power. The marketplace erupted. Gasps split the air. Women covered their mouths, men stepped back, children clutched their mothers. "A queen," they whispered. Could it be true? The soldiers stiffened, their hands twitching toward their swords. Their leader's eyes narrowed, suspicion battling recognition. And then she spoke. Her voice carried across the square, not weak, not frail, but sharp, commanding, undeniable. "I am the queen you seek." The crowd shook with chaos. Some dropped to their knees, bowing out of fear or loyalty. Others recoiled, their faces twisted with anger. "A queen in rags?" one man spat. "She lies." "She mocks us," another cried. But no lie could explain the necklace. No lie could explain the fire in her eyes, the grace in her stance, the authority in her tone. She was what she claimed, and my chest tightened with dread. Why here? Why me? Why had she chosen my broken hut to hide her crown? The soldiers moved closer, their boots pounding against the earth. The villagers' shouts faded into silence as everyone waited for her to speak again. Her gaze swept the crowd, then landed on me. "Child," she said, her voice softer now, filled with sorrow. "You deserve the truth." My breath caught. Every part of me screamed to run, to deny, to shut my ears. But I could not. Her words bound me where I stood. She lifted her chin, the necklace catching the sun. I was queen once, beloved by my people, trusted by my court. But betrayal is a serpent that coils closest to the throne. My own blood rose against me. Brothers who wanted my crown, ministers who sold their loyalty, soldiers who abandoned their oath for gold. Her eyes glistened, but she did not look away. They stormed my palace. My halls burned. My loyal ones died in rivers of blood. By nightfall I was stripped of everything, my crown, my army, my home. But I refused to surrender my life. I fled, I hid, and I became nothing, so that I might, one day, rise again. Her words tore through me like blades. Around me, villagers whispered, torn between pity and fear. Some bowed their heads, others shook with disbelief. But I could barely stand. My mind screamed with questions. Why would a queen live like this? Why sleep on the dirt floor of my hut? Why eat the scraps of a starving family? Her answer came before I could ask. I chose rags because crowns draw blades. I chose exile because survival demands invisibility. And when I had nothing left, you gave me bread. Her eyes locked with mine, sharp and burning. In your kindness, I saw strength greater than armies. You gave when you had nothing, and that, child, is what makes you powerful. Tears blurred my sight. My chest ached. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust her. But with the soldiers so near, her truth felt like a curse pressed into my hands. The leader of the soldiers stepped forward, his shadow swallowing the ground. His eyes fixed on her, then flicked to me. His jaw tightened, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. The villagers held their breath. My siblings clung to me, their little hands digging into my arms. They did not understand her words, but they felt the danger pressing around us. She stepped closer, her voice steady despite the storm. "You gave me shelter when the world gave me nothing," she said, her gaze piercing mine. "Now I ask you something greater." Her words fell like thunder. "Will you protect me, even if it costs you everything?" The market seemed to vanish, its noise drowned by the roar of my own heartbeat. Protect her. A queen hunted by soldiers, betrayed by blood, cursed by her crown. My siblings' frightened faces begged for safety, yet her eyes burned into mine with a plea I could not ignore. My lips trembled, my body shook, and in that moment, I realized the next word I spoke would decide all our fates. At first, I thought the earth was trembling. Then I heard the metallic rattle of armor, the synchronized stomp of boots crushing gravel, the sound of breathless urgency approaching like a coming storm. I peeked out from behind the curtain, and my blood ran cold. Soldiers, dozens of them, armed and scanning every house, every doorway. And then their captain shouted the words that would tear my world apart. "Bring us the Queen!" The silence that followed his command was heavier than any scream. For a heartbeat, no one moved. No one breathed. It was as though time had frozen around me. I turned to look at the villagers, my villagers, the people I'd grown up with, laughed with, danced beside at harvest festivals. Their expressions shifted, one by one, from confusion to suspicion, then to horror. And then, as if orchestrated by an invisible conductor, they all turned toward me. My heart dropped. "She brought the Queen here," someone cried. "She's hiding her," another added, pointing directly at our hut. It all unraveled so quickly. Within moments, shouts rang through the square. Torches were lifted. The crowd began to gather with the fire of vengeance in their eyes. And me. I stood frozen, caught in the storm's eye, unable to defend myself as familiar faces transformed into accusers. I felt a hand on mine, the Queen's. She was calm, terrifyingly calm. She pulled me back from the window, whispering only one word: "Run." But my feet wouldn't obey. I looked outside again, searching the crowd, desperate for some shred of hope. That's when I saw him. Barack. He was more than a neighbor. He was my godfather's son, the man who once lifted me onto his shoulders so I could reach apples from the tall tree in the orchard. His gaze met mine, and then dropped. "She took the Queen to the old grain store," he told the captain. "She's hiding there." I didn't believe what I was hearing. My mouth opened, but no words came. I could only watch as the soldiers turned in unison and began marching in our direction. Barack had betrayed me. My knees buckled. I would have fallen if the Queen hadn't caught me by the arm. Her voice was low but firm. "Now, we run." So we did. We burst through the back, dragging my younger siblings with us. They were crying, confused, stumbling over their own feet. I carried my brother while my sister clung to the Queen's hand. We ran through the village, through alleys I'd known my whole life, past doorways that once offered shelter and now slammed shut as we passed. The shouts behind us grew louder. The crowd had become a mob. We reached the grain store just as the last rays of sunlight vanished behind the hills. The old structure loomed ahead, silent and shadowed. I pushed open the creaking door and ushered everyone inside. The Queen slammed it shut behind us and barricaded it with a fallen beam. Inside it was musty and dark, filled with the scent of decaying grain and wood rot. My siblings collapsed onto a pile of old sacks, too exhausted to speak. I sat beside them, catching my breath, my ears straining for sounds outside. The queen didn't sit. She paced silently, checking the cracks in the walls, watching the shadows. "They'll come here," I whispered. She nodded. Barak made sure of it. I swallowed hard. He was like family. Her eyes softened just for a moment. Fear does strange things to the hearts of men. That silence again, the kind that comes before something terrible. Then, the horn. A deep, ancient sound. It echoed through the forest like a monster's cry. I jumped to my feet. "That's not from the village," I said. The queen's face darkened. "They've sent scouts through the forest. They're surrounding us." My mind raced. "There's a path behind the grain store, through the ravine." She shook her head. "Too exposed. They'll expect that." The horn blew again, closer. My siblings stirred, my brother whimpering in his sleep. I moved to hush him, but then I heard something that stopped me cold. Footsteps, close, slow, deliberate, just outside the door. The queen drew a dagger from beneath her cloak. I took a deep breath and moved quietly to the back, feeling the wall for any weak spots, a plank we could pull, a hole we could crawl through. The footsteps stopped, and then the door creaked open, just slightly. Light from a torch spilled into the room, casting long shadows on the walls. A silhouette stood in the doorway. Tall, familiar. "Don't move," the queen whispered. I squinted through the dim light, trying to see the face behind the torch. And then he spoke. "I didn't want it to come to this," the voice said, low, heavy with guilt. I stepped forward, my heart pounding. "Barak?" He looked at me, sorrow in his eyes, sword still in hand. "They said they'll burn the village if I don't bring her out," he said. And for the first time, I couldn't tell if he'd come to save us or deliver us. We fled under the ghostly light of the moon, our footsteps pounding against the earth as though the ground itself urged us onward. Behind us torches blazed like angry stars, their flames flickering in the night, chasing us across the open plains. My siblings clung to me, their sobs muffled by the wind, while the queen ran just ahead, her cloak tearing through the tall grass. We burst out of the trees, and what lay before us was a sight both breathtaking and terrifying. The savannah stretched wide, endless, dry, merciless, and waiting to swallow us whole. The vastness of the savannah mocked us. No walls to hide behind, no houses to shield us. Only grass that whispered secrets to the wind and thorn bushes that tore at our clothes. My legs ached, my chest burned, but I kept running because behind us I still heard them. The shouts, the horns, the pursuit that refused to die. The queen stopped only long enough to glance at the stars. "Keep moving," she commanded, her voice unshaken. "The night sky will guide us." She pointed upward, to the belt of Orion glittering like 3 silent guardians. "As long as we follow him, we will not lose our way." It amazed me that even now, when fear should have broken her, she carried certainty in her voice. My siblings noticed it too. Their cries softened. They looked at her as though she were more than just a hunted woman, as though she were a light in the darkness. But the savannah was merciless. Hunger chewed at us, thirst scorched our throats, and every step felt heavier than the last. The thorn bushes clawed at our ankles, drawing blood. Strange cries echoed through the night, hyenas laughing in the distance, the low growl of something we couldn't see. I clutched my brother tighter, praying the animals would keep their distance. Hours passed. My body screamed for rest, but the queen's pace never faltered. At last, my sister collapsed, too weak to take another step. She sobbed into the dirt, whispering, I can't go any further." I dropped to my knees beside her, torn between despair and anger. "She's just a child," I cried. "She won't survive this." The queen knelt too. She pressed her palm against the earth, then stood, pointing to a cluster of thorn bushes nearby. "Dig there." I didn't understand, but I obeyed. My hands tore at the dry soil, blistering, until at last, dampness. My heart leapt. I dug faster, and water seeped through the cracks. Not much, but enough. Enough to drink. Enough to hope. My siblings drank greedily, their eyes wide with wonder. I stared at the Queen. "How did you know?" Her lips curved in a faint smile. The earth hides its gifts for those willing to search. For the first time, something shifted inside me. She wasn't just leading us, she was saving us. We pressed on, slower but steadier. To keep us awake, the Queen spoke, not in orders, but in stories. Tales of those who had crossed deserts, who had lived through famine and fire, who had learned to draw strength not from food or shelter, but from will alone. Her words wrapped around us like a shield. My siblings listened in awe, their fear dissolving into fragile trust. I saw it in their eyes. The Queen was no longer a stranger. She was their protector, their guide. As the night dragged on, my own heart softened too. Each time I faltered, she was there. Each time I thought I would collapse, her hand steadied me. I wanted to hate her. She had brought this danger into our lives. But in that moment, I couldn't. The first light of dawn broke over the horizon, painting the grass in shades of gold and crimson. I breathed in deeply, believing for the first time that we had survived the night. But then, I saw them, shadows, moving through the tall grass. At first I thought it was an animal, but the faint clink of metal betrayed them. Swords, shields, soldiers. My breath caught. The Queen froze, her hand tightening on her dagger. Her eyes darted to the left, then to the right. More shadows rose from the grass, dark figures emerging with the rising sun. We hadn't escaped. We had walked straight into their trap. They were everywhere. Behind us, ahead of us, on every side. We were surrounded. The horns blared again, but this time from every direction, drowning the morning with their dreadful cry. My siblings clutched me, their fragile trust breaking into terror once more. The Queen stepped forward, dagger gleaming in the sun, her expression carved with iron resolve. And as the soldiers closed in, I realized dawn hadn't brought freedom. It had brought our reckoning. The circle of steel closed around us. Dozens of soldiers emerged from the grasslands, spears raised, shields gleaming in the morning light, their shadows stretching like bars of a prison around our trembling forms. My siblings clung to me, too terrified to breathe. The air was thick with doom, the savannah itself holding its breath. And then, before I could cry out, the Queen stepped forward, tall, unshaken, radiant, her presence so commanding that even the soldiers hesitated. It was the first time I truly saw her, not as a fugitive, but as a ruler. For a moment, time seemed suspended. The soldiers had expected to corner prey, a woman on the run, exhausted and broken. Instead, they found a lioness who carried her throne in the way she stood. The Queen raised her voice, calm and sharp as a blade. "Lower your spears," she commanded. Her words cut through the chaos of beating hearts and clashing armor. The soldiers froze. I could see it in their faces: confusion, doubt, recognition. They had been told they were hunting a traitor. Yet here stood a woman whose very gaze carried the weight of command. One soldier shuffled his feet, but none obeyed fully. The ring of spears held firm. Then the Queen did something I will never forget. She reached into her cloak and drew forth a small object, wrapped in cloth. With deliberate care, she unwrapped it and held it high for all to see. The sun struck it first, gold, carved with the emblem of the royal bloodline, the royal seal. I gasped. I had heard whispers of it in hushed stories, but I had never believed such a thing could be real. A symbol older than kingdoms, said to recognize not just lineage, but destiny. Whoever bore it was no pretender. They were chosen. The soldiers' reaction was instant. Eyes widened, Knees wavered, spears dipped. Her voice rang out again, firmer this time. "You know this seal. You know who I am. Will you defy your queen?" The silence that followed was heavy with awe, and then, like ripples spreading through water, the soldiers began to kneel. One dropped first, pressing his forehead to the earth, then another, until the entire ring of steel bowed before her, the morning sun glinting off their lowered weapons. A shiver ran down my spine. It was as though I had watched the world shift in a single breath, but not all bowed. At the edge of the circle stood Barak, his jaw set, his eyes dark with shame and fury. He did not kneel. Behind him, a cluster of villagers, those who had chased us, who had spat accusations, still stood upright, their faces a mix of confusion and resentment. "She abandoned us," one of them cried. "Why kneel to her now? She left us to starve." The queen turned her gaze upon them, and I swear the air itself trembled. "I never abandoned you," she declared. "I walked among you, silent, hidden, bearing hunger and pain as you did. I bled with you, and even after your betrayal, here I stand, still choosing to protect you." Her words struck like arrows. The villagers shifted uneasily, their fury faltering, their shame rising. Barak clenched his fists but said nothing. I stood frozen, watching her. She wasn't begging them. She wasn't defending herself. She was reminding them of a truth they had forgotten. And in that moment, I realized something that made my chest tighten. She wasn't just their queen. She was mine too. The silence stretched until even the wind seemed to bow before her. Then slowly, she turned to me. Her expression softened, though her eyes still burned with unyielding fire. She walked toward me, past the kneeling soldiers, past the watching villagers, until she stood right before me. "You," she said, her voice carrying not just to me, but to everyone. "You saw what others could not. You chose kindness when cruelty was easier. And because of that, the crown lives again." My throat closed. I remembered the night we gave her food, the simple act that felt meaningless then. But here it was, echoing like destiny across the savannah. The queen reached for my hand. Her grip was firm, almost heavy with meaning. "You have seen loyalty. You have tasted betrayal. You know what it means to survive. And now," she raised the royal seal so that the light caught both our faces, "you must choose your future." The words hit me like a storm. The soldiers lifted their heads, watching. The villagers leaned forward, waiting. My siblings clutched my dress, sensing something monumental was unfolding. I looked into the queen's eyes, and I saw no doubt there, only trust. She wasn't forcing me. She was giving me something terrifying, something powerful, the choice to decide who I would become. Her voice dropped lower, meant only for me, though the world seemed to listen. "This is the moment, child. Will you walk with me into destiny, or remain here in the shadows?" My heart pounded, torn between fear and fire. The queen's hand was outstretched, the royal seal gleaming like the sun itself, and I realized my next breath could shape the fate of us all. She drew me into her arms before I could speak, before I could even breathe. Her embrace was not of a ruler claiming loyalty, but of a mother claiming a child. The world around us, soldiers kneeling, villagers whispering, my siblings clutching my hands, seemed to dissolve into silence. I felt her heartbeat, strong and steady, and for the first time, I realized it wasn't just her crown that had been restored tonight. She had given me something far greater. Belonging. Her voice trembled against my ear, though her tone carried the same strength that had silenced an army moments before. "You are my daughter now, and nothing in this world will ever change that." Tears burned my eyes, but I held them back. I couldn't fall apart here, not in front of the soldiers, not in front of the villagers who had thrown stones at me hours before. Still, the words struck deeper than any weapon ever could. She pulled away and turned to my siblings, who stood frozen in awe. My sister stared up at her as though she were a vision from a dream. My little brother, usually shy, shuffled forward and tugged at her cloak. The queen knelt to them, her hands gentle as she touched their faces. "You will never be hungry again," she promised. "You will not wander in fear. You will have shelter, warmth, and a chance to grow." My sister broke then, sobbing as she buried her face into the queen's chest. My brother clutched her hand tightly, nodding as though her promise was already carved into his soul. I stood there, watching the woman who was hunted, betrayed, and scorned just hours ago, now standing like the pillar of everything my family had ever prayed for. The queen rose again and faced the soldiers, her posture regal, her expression unshaken. She raised the golden seal high, so none could deny the truth of who she was. "Remember this," she declared. "One act of kindness gave me back my crown. When I was nothing, when I was hunted and starving, this family gave me bread. They gave me a place to rest. They gave me life. And now, I give them a future." The words thundered through me. That night flashed in my mind, the cracked bread, the last meal we had, shared with a stranger at our fire. I remembered the doubt I had felt, the fear of losing everything we had left. Yet that single act had rippled into something far beyond anything I could imagine. The soldiers lowered their heads in reverence. Even the villagers, who only hours ago had screamed for my blood, now looked ashamed, uncertain, humbled. Some dropped to their knees, others wiped their eyes, perhaps realizing that betrayal could not undo mercy. The queen turned back to me, her gaze softening. "I will return to the throne," she said, her voice quieter now, for me alone. "My people need me. My crown is waiting." My chest tightened. "And us?" She touched my cheek with a hand that trembled only slightly. "You are not forgotten. I leave you with safety, with strength, with a place in this world. You have your siblings, and now you have yourself. That is enough. More than enough." I wanted to beg her not to leave, but her eyes silenced me. They were not the eyes of someone abandoning me. They were the eyes of someone entrusting me with a legacy I didn't yet understand. The queen stepped back, her soldiers forming around her. Their formation was precise, their loyalty absolute. With every step she took, her presence grew, as though she was already wearing her crown again. The villagers parted as she walked through, heads bowed, voices hushed. For the first time, they didn't see a fugitive. They saw their queen. I stood with my siblings, the dust of her departure rising in the golden morning light. My sister clutched my hand, whispering, "She's really going back." My brother leaned against me, tired but smiling faintly. I exhaled slowly, realizing what she had left behind in me. I was no longer just a frightened girl who stumbled through the night with no path. I had strength now. I had purpose. She had placed a crown of responsibility on my shoulders, and though it wasn't made of gold, it was heavier than any jewel. The silence that followed her departure felt different than any silence I had known before. It wasn't empty. It was full. Of possibility, of promise, of a future I never thought we could have. I looked at my siblings, tired, hungry, but alive, and for the first time, full of hope. And I knew. The Queen's gift wasn't just safety. It was the strength to carry on. As we turned back toward the village, I whispered into the morning air, my words meant for no one and everyone at once. That last meal, it gave her back her crown. I squeezed my siblings' hands, leading them forward. And it gave us a future too. But deep in my heart, I knew. Our story was far from over. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video and share it with others who love powerful tales. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter in this journey. Tell me in the comments what moment moved you the most. I love reading your thoughts. And remember, Every story we share here is just the beginning of something greater.